Hello there, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Al Terzi alongside Lori Perez. Now, President Obama was on a college road trip this past week, unveiling his new plan focused on trying to make college more affordable.
On a two-day bus tour, he talked about improving access to higher education as a goal that is going to benefit individual students, of course, but also the overall economy. Joining us now is Congressman Courtney from the 2nd District. He's a member of the House Education and Workforce Committee. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Hi, Lori.
And
Hi, Al.
First thing I think we should bring up is a picture of you. You were right there behind the president as he was signing the student loan rates bill. There you are.
There he is.
Yep. A good spot. How'd you get that spot?
Well, it was 2 weeks ago, actually, and as a member of the House Education Committee and someone who's been working on this issue for the last 5 years, the Stafford student loan interest rate was the legislation that he was signing. Again, that legislation for this year will cut the rate from 6.8 to 3.8. That's 11 million students who use that program, and that'll be fixed for the whole term of the loan for the whole 10 years. Again, in out years, it's going to be tied to Treasury notes, and we've got to watch that like a hawk. But again, I think it was an important step forward for students going into college this year. But it's only about managing debt, you know, and that's not the real answer. I mean, obviously what's happening out there, and the president talked about this today, is that over the last 30 years on average, the cost of going to college has gone up 250%, and middle income, median income has only gone up about 16%. And, you know, at some point, the federal student assistance programs, Pell Grants and the Stafford loan program, you know, you can't just kind of keep filling up a tire with a leak in it. You know, you've got to start really setting up incentives to really start controlling the cost. And that's what the speech was today in Buffalo. I give him great credit that, you know, he's not just sort of stopping at the bill that we signed a couple weeks ago, but really trying to, again, get some new incentives in the system.
Now, he wants to expand this pay-as-you-earn idea, where what the student pays in paying back the loan, the payment is going to be limited to a certain percentage of income.
That's right.
Is that correct?
10% of income. Again, in 2010, that system was enacted. It was one of Ted Kennedy's sort of legacy issues. But again, that was only for loans written after 2007. And again, the proposal today is about trying to expand the scope of that to, again, students who are still paying sometimes well into middle age on the Stafford student loan program. But he's also talking about setting up a ranking system to really look at the performance of higher ed institutions across the country. You know, it's time that we start looking at, you know, the $150 billion a year that we're spending on student assistance and really not sort of treating all colleges necessarily the same. If some schools have higher default rates than graduation rates, I mean, the fact is that the Department of Education at least has to start informing students and families before they sign on the bottom line, you know, what the track record is for some of these institutions.
But that seems like the easier stuff to validate, right? I mean, how many students are graduating, how many are completing their classes, but there's also kind of a different aspect of how do you define value or success that a college might have, and I think that's going to be very complicated.
No, it is, but, you know, again, there's ways of tracking gainful employment records in terms of, you know, how are students who have graduated with degrees or left without degrees, how are they doing in terms of their employment and their income, and there are ways of tracking that. The Department of Education actually has already put it into place in terms of tracking the for-profit sector. Those are the schools that advertise in the middle of the night. And frankly, there's real mixed results in terms of some of those institutions. But again, you know, those are going to be the issues that we really, on the committee, and I think both within the department, they're going to have to spend a lot of time on. But again, you know, the important thing that he's doing here today is, again, just sort of not looking at this issue about more and more grants and loans, that we've got to start really talking about, you know, just affordability for everybody in terms of the system. A college degree, by the way, is still critical. We've seen that with this recession. Individuals who have post-high school degrees, 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees, they have fared better than people without those degrees. And that's really something that, if we look at the workforce needs of the future and the challenges of our economy, you know, this is a critical issue in terms of growth for the country.
Another thing that put you in the news this week with Senator Blumenthal, you were out looking at Plum Island.
Right.
Obviously, you have to look at it from a distance. You can't go there.
That's right.
Wouldn't want to go there, maybe. But animal research and other scientific research going on there. And the government wants to sell it. I understand there's a plan to move what's being done there out to Kansas.
That's correct.
And the sale of that would, the proceeds would help pay for that.
Well, that was sort of the initial plan, but as the costs of the Kansas project have just ballooned over the last 4 or 5 years since it was first proposed, and also the closer examination by the Government Services Administration, who's in charge of selling the property, in terms of the wetlands and other restrictions. Again, that balance of offset is now completely capsized, and that's why we're really asking both the Department of Agriculture to take a second look at this, and also really look at the proposal that was put into law that really takes the sale of this property out of the normal process where other federal uses, nonprofits can have first dibs on it. This is a very precious environmental asset. I mean, because of that sort of unique aspect, I mean, there's been virtually zero development.
So you just leave it as is?
Well, personally, I think that, yes, the move to Kansas, I think, is highly questionable in terms of the costs. I also think an animal research lab with, somewhat hazardous activities in the middle of the beef belt is somewhat of a questionable idea to begin with.
Kansas.
Yeah,
right
so
there.
it's, and this visit's going to really give us, I think, some good ammunition.
We want to make sure that we do get to talk to you about this tour now, right? Republicans are on a tour to defund Obamacare.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like Republicans are willing to trigger a shutdown in order to put a stop to it. I mean, how much in peril are we?
Well, again, I think there's certainly some elements of the Republican House caucus that have already signed letters. So there's about 60 saying that we shouldn't fund the government after October 1st. The leadership of the caucus, Speaker Boehner, Eric Cantor, who are no pushovers when it comes to resisting the Affordable Care Act, though, have really pulled back and held off in terms of that type of approach. It would be a huge mistake.
I mean, a political mistake.
I think a political mistake and an economic mistake for the country. The brinksmanship has got to start coming to an end here. The nice thing about the student loan bill picture the other day, I actually had a Republican standing next to me, and Angus King, an independent. It was kind of like a drink of
possible.
It was like a drink of water in a desert. To actually see people compromise and negotiate. And that bill was. I could have done a few things differently, but the fact is that whether it's a town council, state legislature, or Congress, people have got to recognize you're not there to debate things.
And you think of all these
posture.
people, the students who now are covered by their parents and the pre-existing conditions and all the other things they're in that would go away if it's defunded,
I was at a senior center today who are getting prescription assistance up in Wyndham. There's about 180 seniors now who are getting their donut hole costs cut in half because of the Affordable Care Act. I mean, you blow that up, all those seniors, there's about 12,000 in my district who we know are getting real tangible assistance because of the Affordable Care Act. The kids who are covered under parents' policy, again, it would just be a bad policy move, and it's not going to happen. I mean, the president has made it clear he's not going to, be held hostage to that type of brinksmanship.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Great to be back.
We appreciate your being here, Joe.
Okay.
And, always good to see you.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks very
Laurie.
much.